everybody. Today we're going to address something that I think a lot of people have seen pop up, especially if you're using Cursor. I know Cursor made a big deal about this in their 0.47 update around MCP being involved or introduced. MCP servers being used more and more within the AI agent realm. We see more coming about it. And I want to have a conversation to actually get to understand how is it being used? What are the advantages? How do you use it correctly? And actually understand an acronym that I think a lot of people just see getting thrown around. I'm joined today with Archaviste, who is building around this concept, very well versed in the AI agent and developer world. Excited to have you. I think jump in first, a little bit of your background, and then yeah, I think getting into the bread and butter of why and what um, is the best way to start here.
Yeah, so I'm one of a pair of developers at Fabulous AI. We're working primarily in the open source space, trying to get MCP out to the public, make it more accessible, and also tie it in to the current AI agent ecosystem. We currently have, I guess not have, but we're in the ARC complex. So we have partnerships across the complex, basically getting our MCP servers out to those providers. But we're also in the space to basically advance tech as a whole. We actually have PRs out for Anthropic's main MCP SDK. Um, and yeah, I mean, as for myself, I'm an engineer primarily in the cloud ops type space, but I've been interested in AI for years now. And our project primarily, again, centers itself around MCP. So everyone's asking, what is MCP, right? The definition being Model Context Protocol, which literally tells you nothing, right? But
Yeah, it gives you literally. It could not be more of a vague AI term.
yeah, it's literally used. I don't know why they named it that, but the easiest way I would say to explain it TLDR is the API layer for agents. So as it stands, agents are pretty powerful, and a lot of what they do is kind of magicy and duct tapey. They can be trained on really advanced data sets. They can have access to the broader internet, but when it comes to doing things that are maybe account gated or hidden under a layer of security or something, um, the agents fall flat, right? If there's extra context needed, or if there's, you can fine tune an agent, but you can't get it to do one exact thing, right? We've all had image generation where we've tried to get out a picture and we're like, hey, say Archiviste on it, and it'll jumble letters or something. And if you're particularly in tune with the AI space, most people will have 6 or 7 tabs open, one with image gen, one with ChatGPT, one with Claude, and they'll have their workflow automation in another place. What MCP allows you to do is essentially abstract pretty much anything on the internet. It could also be local, right? If you want to do things in robotics, you can apply MCP to that. But what it'll do is it'll abstract whatever service you're trying to um, target or use into an MCP server. For example, we've done all of the social clients, Discord, Telegram, Twitter. We've done Arxiv. We're doing Google Maps right now. We've done Shopify. And we've got a list of like literally a dozen other MCP servers. I know there's other players in the space like Llama and Prisma. I think Stripe's trying to get their own MCP out.
Oh,
So it's a pretty
interesting.
buzzing space. Yeah.
And that basically just opens up for this more sensitive, like, I mean, obviously, it also is providing that more context in the example of like image generation that you just mentioned, but
Yeah.
also if you want to do these more sensitive things where Stripe is a payment processor.
Right.
Um, we use them every day, API calls to run businesses, etc. Um, but then you think, okay, well, an agent needs to actually go purchase something. How are they purchasing that? How are they getting that information? Understanding, uh, which account is linked to who, etc. And then also not just having this like open box where anybody can come in and use that, or I would say take advantage of a non-secure environment. I think that's a big concern that I think a lot of the AI companies have right now is letting what these very powerful systems go, and then not having the infra alongside it to actually function safely. Um, I think the Stripe is a good example of that.
Yeah, and that concern is extremely valid, right? As it stands, if you use any kind of even other MCP servers, you're basically giving your API keys, your secrets, all of these things to those services. If not, if it's a blank, wrapper in an API, you're inputting that into Claude Desktop or Cursor and kind of hoping and praying that those secrets will be taken care of.
Right.
Yeah,
I,
it's
I
funny
think
because
I think everybody's doing that at this point.
yeah. So I have a background in cloud security, and one thing we do personally with our SSE servers is we actually abstract that layer away, and we'll have a customized MCP endpoint. So if it's like Shopify, for example, you have your Shopify store admin key. That's pretty important, right? We'll have people plug that into our playground, and you'll get like a custom UUID on your
Mhm.
Shopify endpoint, and then you can go ahead and plug that into Cursor. And it'll actually make the calls to the tool to the server. But as far as Cursor's concerned, or you know, sneaky people looking up traffic on your on your side are concerned, all they'll see is just the basic RPC call, right? And as far as your data, yes, it all gets executed on the server and then handed off to Shopify's API. That's one way of doing it. I'd imagine there are other ways of doing it, but right now, the landscape is still kind of new, and with new things comes,
I mean, it's
you
real. Like
know,
what I think when people think new, they're like, oh, like oh, it's been a couple. Like it's very, very new. Like we again,
yeah,
Cursor just rolled this out. It hasn't been to the extent that we've seen others. I think methods or frameworks being used. Um, I'm
yeah,
curious in your head from, and I think that's another good example on the agent side where I think most people listening might be playing, which is they're looking at crypto agents, they're trying to understand the landscape. What is like the big thing to take away from like if somebody's talking about MCP, like where is that most likely going to be used where you should be like, "Oh, that's interesting. I want to like check out that more." I guess that's like like even a more personal question. Like I see a project throw out, "Oh, we're using MCP." Like where is that like filler and then where is that actually like, "Oh, that's being used correctly for like real value."
right. So the two big terms are composability and interoperability. And again, to the average person, that means absolutely nothing. Right? It's jack shit. What you can take away from that, what I can say, especially for like maybe Fortune 500 companies or people that are not necessarily in crypto or super in depth in the AI space, regular people, are workflow automation suites, right? I'm pretty sure you've heard of Zapier, and there's like
Yep.
20 other alternatives to that,
Yeah.
right? And there are a bunch of new front ends competing now in the space. I'm going to give a little shout out to Rhizome here, something that ARC's working on. We may or may not be MCP providing for them in the future. But the way I'd explain it is, let's say you're in Google Sheets, or you're taking down notes, or you're trying to get things done, and you have 5 or 6 services that you would normally have in your tabs, one by one by one. And let's say, I think we just put out an article where I took an idea and I made it into a product. I was like, hey, I like pandas. I want to make a t-shirt. I don't know how to price t-shirts. Figure it out for me, right? Generate me an image of a t-shirt with a panda on it. I'm not creative, and then make me a product, right? You can do things like that. You can do things like financial research. You can go, hey, pull out the top 10 cryptocurrency prices. Now get me Twitter sentiment on that. Figure that out, and then put that in a Google spreadsheet and make like a report or something, right? So there's a tons of things you can do. Again, I'm not super creative. But once you stack 5 or 6 services on top of each other, it gets really powerful. And honestly, the sky's the limit with this stuff. MCP server providers, I would compare that to something like Gumroad for your agent. But imagine your agent being, 10 to 1,000 times more capable than you are. And it starts to add up. Yeah.
That's actually crazy when you start thinking about like the layering of it of you can have all these different services like without having to build it yourself where they can all work together instantaneously become interoperable. I guess that would be the right word to say there. But like, hey,
Yeah.
all of a sudden
No, yeah.
that image generation that you would have done in 4.0, now it gets generated, and then you need to get it on a shirt. Well, that's automatically done, but then it's uploaded to a Shopify product listing, and your Stripe integration's done, and somebody can come click buy, and you just sold a product, but you literally the only thing you did was prompt, "Hey, I need you to make a Shopify product
Yeah.
of a panda on a t-shirt, do it and make it for sale," and you just made, $20.
Yeah, and there's services like, Agent Hangout that we have a partnership with where you don't even need to type anymore. You can just talk to the AI assistant, and it'll figure it out for you.
Oh, it's so interesting. Can you for those who aren't familiar with Arc, can you dive into like what is Arc, and then why Arc of everywhere that you could be? Yeah,
Yeah,
that
so Arc's rig RS is a framework in Rust for AI agents. On its own, it's pretty simple, but the power in it comes from the fact that using Rust and using their framework, which is pretty lightweight, you can accomplish the same thing as other frameworks, but in a way more efficient manner. And the end goal, obviously, being if you want to get it on IoT devices or things like that, it's just much more suited for that end. Our project sort of came into the open source space where we wanted to make a contribution to AI, and there were a few other frameworks to choose from, but some of them were a little convoluted with their package structure or the dependencies, and we thought Arc was way more straightforward. Our project, while building on top of Arc, isn't strictly confined to that. And it's the same thing with MCP, right? The good thing about it is that if you make a server in one place, assuming everyone follows the protocol, it's consumable on any framework, any kind of agent platform. You want to use it on Claude, you want to use Cursor, you want to use any kind of model, any kind of framework, it's fine, right? That sort of appealed to us because the whole open source community, the whole idea is, hey, I do a little bit of work, somebody contributes, and then the third guy spins some crazy idea out of it, right?
right.
The cool thing that Arc's working on right now too is that they're working on like self discovery, right, so to speak, with Rhizome. So
What is self-discovery?
right, exactly, right. So if we think
Let's
about
let's
again,
assume I don't know anything. Assume we're gonna pretend.
this is
Totally
kind
not
of cool.
totally not a real thing.
Yeah, so right now I need in order for like Cursor to use my MCP servers, I have to go in there and plug in like, hey, if I have a list of 12 of them, I have to go in and put 12 of them out there. But if
Gotcha.
I use something that has like it becomes like a Google search essentially for other MCP servers, and all I would need to do is have my agent hook up to that, and then it'll find it'll find the MCP servers it needs without me ever pointing it to it.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, yeah,
There's oh man, there's like this is what's so cool about AI. Like there's it's so funny how like the things that we take for standard of like, oh, you go Google and you find like that just happens in the background now without you explicitly doing like it just happens, which is kind
yeah.
of it's freaky to think about. Is it fair to say like we're in the moment of like the next phase of AI is this whole like tool calling, server use, actually being able to do things that are not a single step. Like ChatGPT is a single step. Hey, can you do this? Now, deep research is this whole like serialized like process of like research and looking and taking additional context and then moving to the next step. Now we're kind of looking at like, okay, it's serialized, but also there's parallels, there's previous context, there's services. All this is now the new phase of like things being done.
Yeah, for sure. I think
If that
people are
makes sense.
tired of yeah, people are tired of the novelty. I mean, Italian brain rot's still pretty cool, but people people are mostly tired of the novelty and the slop, and people throw money at these LLMs, and it's just generative. We've gone to the next stage of I need real utility out of this, right? Not just an estimation. And I think actually the next stage is probably robotics, to be honest,
Really?
because you can have it hooked up to sensors or a number of things, right? And that's where it probably gets a little scarier, and where we need to be a little bit more deliberate on security, because web frameworks they're pretty tried and tested. you can apply most security practices into AI. It's everything's on the web, right? Um, but when it comes to like IoT and things like that, it gets a little more dubious, right?
Right. Do you I mean, at some point, we're probably going to see we kind of have already with 1 or 2 that I think have been out there, but, like, hardware AI crypto projects coming out that are like that like, I think that's such a higher, like, standard because it's super easy, like you just said, the slop's easy. I just ask ChatGPT to do this or, I spin up an agent that's just a personality wrapper that we saw hundreds and thousands of those come out that actually have the ability to mechanically engineer something or put something together that's, "Oh, that's cool, that's interesting." That's a much higher bar. Um, I feel like we'll see a few, but they're gonna be like, "Oh, funded by Y Combinator, funded by
Yeah,
A16Z." Like, it's just so much further out.
yeah. I mean, not to leak anything, but we do plan to step into that realm, right? Right now, we've got a lot of other things cut out for us, but we do plan to dip our toes in there, and it is an interesting space. I mean, there's so much you can do at this point. What I've noticed a lot of is there's a lot of repetition, right? Same with the AI slop. Someone will come up with an MCP server, and then someone will try to make like, 5 other people will do the same server. And if you actually go on to like Llama or these other services, and you try to consume these MCP servers, what you'll find out quickly is that the documentation, even though it came out 3 weeks ago, is somehow outdated, or that the server itself does not work, right? And while we do push our updates a little slower, we at least have the guarantee that hey, you can use our server, and we've actually open sourced a lot of our stuff. So if you don't want to use our server and you want to spin it up yourself on SSE or local, take our code, right? Matter of fact, we even have an SDK for MCP. So if you have an idea that we don't have and you don't want to wait on us to develop something, go ahead and do it yourself, you know?
I mean, that's the power of open source that
Yeah.
for a while, from my, like, background being, like, venture and, like, investor thinking, I was like, "Oh, no, you don't want other people knowing, you wanna do it all in-house," but, I would say the last year of watching the agent space kinda blow up and being like, actually, there is huge, uh there's no moat, but there's like the idea of like expanding very quickly and having people use it and then becoming like integrated into everything has a ton of value in it. Um, I think I think it's fair to say like open source is probably only going to get more and more popular in the coming years. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, and I actually think it's really cool that crypto, out of all the things crypto does besides enable gambling, actually enabled open
Whoa, we're
source
not allowed to
technology.
say the G word here.
Oh, I'm sorry. um, it's enabled builders and developers kind of to fend for themselves, to not be beholden to pitch decks and all of these things, right?
Yeah,
We saw with like Eliza, even though there was a little bit of A16Z in there, but we saw a lot of other projects come out, tokenize, and just by nature of them having tokens, developers now are able to self fund to a degree, right? And it gives them freedom, and I think it also gives them even greater accountability. Rather than trying to trick some shareholder, I have to be accountable to my holders or to my consumers, right? Which makes the tech more directed to an end, right? And it also allows creative freedoms for the developer. I think that's super understated. And I think as time goes on, more and more people are going to be frustrated with the status quo of how it is in companies right now. And the alternative will be there to just, go into the open source community, get your stuff out there, and move on from there. And I think actually that kind of feeds forward to now where the workplace is more competitive, and these companies that were rigid and had all of these, whatever issues that may come with it, now have to adapt, right? I think we've seen Microsoft do a lot of good stuff in the open source space. And I think it's maybe one step backward in terms of profitability, where I could make a proprietary software and charge people for it. But it's 2 steps forward in that if I'm helping contribute to open source software, I'm obviously going to understand it better than the next person, and by nature, maybe make a competitive product. But also, other people can support it, right? I may
right.
be a crack 10x developer for like a year or so, right? but then others will come after me, and there's always a feedback where it's always, hey, I took the Fabulous SDK, I made a new SDK, and it's better, objectively or whatever it may be. There's nothing stopping me as a developer from going on and taking that new piece of work, right, adding something to that. And I think it's very short-sighted to play a game where you think there aren't enough chips to go around, because there, especially in the AI space, there most definitely is.
100%. I always think about analytics.js, which, open source framework for tracking websites. And now you have, I mean, $100 million companies all around, literally off of 520 lines of code built off of that. Um,
Right.
and it's that same idea. I really encourage people to, like, if you're listening and being like, oh, like there is no value in being open source, take a second, do some research. Like there's a ton of examples. I think also your point for these companies, yes, short term step could be a step back. It could be two steps back, even in some cases. But
Mhm.
the on the long tail of this, it's a net positive as long as they manage that correctly. I'm sure there's examples of companies who've done it absolutely wrong, and it's a huge regret or fuck up on their part. Um, I'm it's interesting. I consider myself well versed in the agent space. In your eyes today, obviously you guys are building where, like, what sector for like of the agent space are you interested in to like work with? And are there any like agents that you can like point to and be like, ah, like these guys are doing it correctly with using MCP integrations?
That is a good question. I would say primarily, I keep harping on the workflow automation thing,
Mm,
but it just seems like the easiest, most low-hanging fruit with the greatest result set coming out of that. As far as like a specific agent, I think we're in a good space right now where every few weeks, someone that was second place comes first place, or out of nowhere comes things like DeepSeek. So as far as a specific model or company, I don't know if there are any leaders that I could confidently say in 6 months would still be leaders in the space,
hmm.
um, which actually is kind of a good thing, right? In tech, we're thinking about FANG, right? There's Apple, Google, Microsoft, right? And it's pretty much relegated to those things. And yeah, there are some bigger behemoths in the AI space,
Yeah.
um, but it's still so new and still so raw. I mean, Grok came out of nowhere. I don't know where they got all that data, this space from. So as far as model, I think the good thing about MCP is that you can sort of be free from using one model, right? If 4.0, let's say, is good at image generation, I can use it for that. If Claude's good at code reasoning, I can use it for that. If Grok's good at math, or I mean, not really good at math, but let's just say it was good at math, right? I could use it for that, right? And I think the workflow automation space is probably the best thing, just because it force multiplies uh, people that are not developers. I think developers have a huge advantage. We've seen it in the crypto space. We've seen it pretty much everywhere else.
Yep.
Everyone's trying to learn to code, or not, because they're scared of AI taking over, right? But
No, you should
I
want to code. That's when you're gonna most need to code, is if they take over. Then you can actually be useful.
Yeah, but I think for like the regular office worker, people that might be disgruntled seeing all of these nerds basically take over, I think getting them more, getting their buy-in into the tech and getting them excited about the tech, right, is what really matters, right? We've seen things, especially in the AI and tech space, where everyone that consumes it is already a fan. It's like a sport that's a niche sport that people that watch it are also practitioners of it. And I think part of getting AI and MCP out there is getting people like my mom, for example, right? Or my grandma who can't send an email, but maybe she can talk to Alexa, and then she doesn't need to know the word MCP, but she can reason out the tools, right? And I think for them, getting by their day to day at their jobs, or whatever they have in real life, paying bills, things like that. If we can get those abstractions taken care of first, I think we can get larger market buy-in. Then in with that comes funding and interest, and now it's on the news.
Right. The abstraction side is so massive. In
Yeah.
abstract, which is an L2, uh, they obviously their name is literally abstract, but the abstraction idea of like, hey, you don't need to have your private key, like that's the future. User experience is the future for
100%.
crypto. The same thing for AI though. Like if you really think about it, the user experience of getting to that final photo of a panda on a t-shirt, I think it's a great example, by the way. Um, Getting to that final even just image and then like getting it like that is still a very hands-on process, and you could abstract all
Mhm.
of that away. Now think about something that's even like a really complex task that you might personally spend an hour on. Well, yes, if you have access to a database and you have access to private account details, etc., that then opens up like, okay, you didn't have to copy and paste that in. Uh you didn't have to go and generate a query within another database just to get like it just happens for you. Um yeah, that I think that's like the big takeaway here is like MCP is what is enabling that.
100%, yeah. I think, especially in the MCP kind of, I don't know if it was November or October, but that's when the protocol first started, and we saw servers coming out maybe a few weeks from that. It was pretty raw. I mean, we're almost in May now. It was pretty raw until about February, right? And if you tried to actually use some of those servers, especially in Claude, you couldn't use SSCs. So that means you couldn't use remotely hosted servers. So you'd have to spin them up yourself, which sort of defeats the point, right? So I think the next big space is those aggregators, and again, that self-discovery. Point your agent to an aggregator, have it find the server it needs, have it get the tools it needs, maybe even self-description, right? Um, Sneak peek, we're working on a custom studio here where people don't need to wait on somebody else to build their own MCP server if they want to give them a CLI. I mean, this again is for developers mostly, but
Right.
it'll sort of abstract away the difficulty. For example, I don't actually know that much Rust. Steve O'Huncho, our main developer, learned Rust on the job, and I think that's sort of the beauty of it, right? That even though it seems like a very difficult language, the Arc framework very straightforward. SDKs that we created very straightforward. You don't need to be a subject matter expert in Rust to get something out of it. Maybe to get the most out of it, right?
Sure.
But to get yourself an MCP server running, if you have an idea, get it done, right? Um, we use Claude all the time to vibe code, right?
All the time. Oh, we lost him. Uh,
Oops, did I cut out there?
yeah, you're back though. You're back.
Oh, sweet. Yeah, there's nothing stopping the next person from taking over that work and making something cool, right? And honestly, we've made it pretty easy to the point we actually consume our own SDK and make everything out of that SDK. Um,
You
I
consume your
kind of
own
lost your
SDK.
question.
You
Well, okay.
consume your own SDK. Okay, that makes
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and we're gonna make it even easier to make a CLI tool, so you don't even need to code at
I
some
mean,
point.
you guys are truly an infra. You guys are building infra for the space.
Right.
I think
Yeah.
originally you said you wanted to give back or you want like that, but you're providing infrastructure for a lot of these things that other projects consume and use.
Right, rather than making some kind of slop or false promises or anything like that, we'd rather empower others, and by nature empower ourselves, to just get the tech moving forward, and again to get more buy-in across the board. Right, the more capable developers there are there, abstracting services out, the more eyes we get on it, and then we all grow together, right? My PR is inside of a greater repo. You come in, you put a PR in there too. I think this is really important too. Is if going back to the whole open source thing, for hiring managers and people in hiring positions like myself. When I've tried to hire, there are people that are really good at interviews and terrible at their job, right?
Yeah.
But if you can point me to your GitHub without a bunch of spammed commits, where you can point me to some open source software that you contributed to, I can see in not in real time, but I can see a ledger, right? The blockchain, so to speak. I can see a ledger of your work and your contributions over time. Have you grown a developer? How much you can contribute? Your capability in a stack, right? It's all there. And I think that's a great opportunity, especially for people trying to break out, maybe in school or or maybe in different professions, right?
You have to get your hands dirty. I think that's
Yeah.
uh and again, this is like a heavy developer focused conversation, but like blockchain,
Yeah.
like that's the same reason people ask like, "Oh, what's your wallet address?" if they're like if you're interviewing for a job in Web3. Like, can you show me that? All right, well, was everything just like you sending and receiving like transactions between Coinbase and like a MetaMask and buying like an OpenSea drop? Like that's not like demonstrative. Like, were you staking? Were you doing, using Eigenlayer? Were you doing loans on a certain protocol? Like, you can get very advanced and show, like, okay, this guy can do the interview, but like he has a skill. AI is probably trending in that direction, even for lower tier jobs that don't require developer knowledge of like, okay, show me the processes that you've built. Show me your workflow of like, uh, I know ChatGPT has like their GPTs that you can build, but we're getting to the point where it's like, all right, what is your workflow? Show me how you've used AI. What does that look like?
Right, yeah. And I think it'll solidify your place in the workplace. I know last year, the year before, when AI started getting more of a buzz, people were sort of scared of being automated out of their jobs. And what we're finding out now is that AI sort of needs to be guided, right? And that with a human there, um, driving it around, that's not a C-suite person trying to cut 20% of the workforce, right? Someone that's capable at their job will just use ChatGPT or AI to make their work more efficient, right?
Yeah.
A process that would take 10, 20 hours might take 5 now, right? Or you might still take the 20 hours, but you might get deeper inferences out of it. You might get more productivity out of it. Um, timelines might be shorter. They won't get longer, but they'll get shorter or they'll get more efficient, right? Um, I've actually heard from some of my friends that have nothing to do with development or AI that their workplaces are becoming increasingly less hostile to to AI, right?
It's interesting. I just
Yeah.
had a high school reunion over the weekend. I went back to, and just walking around, I ran into the head of like the tech department. I was like, "How are you guys handling AI like on the campus? Like, are you guys saying no?" And he was like, "Literally, they're gonna find a way. Like, people are gonna use it, but like, they still need to like like if we ask you a question about like how to use a boolean like you need to understand the concept of that, but do we expect you to write out like do you have to like know like be able to write out like all of these like redundant things? No, use AI for that. That's that you understand the process of doing that and setting it up. Um, but at the end of the day, like you're just never gonna be in a world where it's like you don't have access to this anymore, which is so funny to see like this huge adoption into. But then again, like I remember like taking SATs, like you were only allowed like a certain type of like calculator. Um, versus like you couldn't have a phone. You could like it's just crazy how it's like, all right, you know what? Everybody's gonna have AI. Fuck it. Like, you can have it.
Imagine that calculator hooked up to MCP servers.
I would have gone to Harvard. There's definitely a kid out like there's definitely somebody out there who's like breaking into like tech like a TI-84 calculator, figuring out how to run like ChatGPT on it. I'm sure that's been done at this point.
Yeah, somebody flashing Linux or something on there, something crazy.
Exactly. Um yeah, the hacking like the modification and like like pushing AI into places that it hasn't been before seems like it's hitting our industry more and more within the Web3 side of uh everything is tokenized now. There's some sort of AI connection into everything. I I want to like wrap this back around into where you guys as like as working within the MCP infra side. Um, is there a world where like users should like or people that are like trying to build companies, they should be thinking about like, okay, I have data or I have a service, I'm running a company, like I can turn that into a new revenue stream through MCP. Is that possible to like think about it in that way?
Yeah, for sure. I think I used the example of Gumroad before.
Mm, that's a good point.
This is sort of a reach, but I think AI and MCP tooling and these things, maybe it might not be MCP, it might be something else in the future. But I think it'll go the way streaming services are kind of right now, where if you want a certain flavor, some licensing for your favorite TV show uh, might be on, Hulu versus Netflix or things like that. I think there'll be Hulu, Netflix, and all these type of companies, some kind of abstraction of those companies, uh, basically startups that are out today will sort of form into those, and the average consumer will have their favorite agent or set of agents from whatever mainstream company it is, and they'll consume those services as like packs, right? That's like my like 2030 vision, right? I think in the near term, though, I think for companies, ourselves and others, to really differentiate yourselves, I think the biggest thing is getting that impact, right? Um, a good example is, I mean, this is sort of relegated to corporate, but people are used to making ETL pipelines, right? I
Yep.
think the next thing is getting like an agent MCP pipeline, right? How do I make workflows um, out of these composable services? Or rather, could I make a composable service that is a workflow, right? Instead of me taking 5 services, why don't I just make a service that does all 5 things?
Right, and that's
Uh,
packaged into one, and then
exactly.
those are, again, a big word here, abstracted away from your end user,
Right.
but it's
Hint,
not.
hint. Custom MCP servers come in fabulous.
I I think
um,
that, okay, I, again, I'm not, by no, I will never like claim to be smart or like well versed on something I'm not. MCPs are one that I'm truly not. That kind of that's like the click moment for me on like, okay,
mhm.
what's the end game here? And you guys are building out that like ability to take those chunks, or let users come in and build their own chunk and then end up as part of like a larger service. And there's obviously there's a business there.
Right. Yeah, and the idea for us more so again is translating that later to consumers. So it's, hey, I have something that seems to be a very simple service where you're like, oh, okay, cool, it can fucking change my Google sheet. But what if I took an actual workflow that people do all day at their jobs and demonstrated an AI doing that, you know, 5 times as fast, right?
Right.
Doing product research, getting a product out, something that would take 2 or 3 hours, getting it done in 10 minutes. That's pretty cool, right? If you stack that over a week or two and you compare that to someone that's not using these tools, it's not like a bridge, it's a gulf, right? I'm getting an enormous amount of work done. I'm not any smarter than you. I'm not any more talented than you are. I'm merely embracing new tech. And I think that's how it works with any kind of tech. People that were, when computers first came out, people were against using them, against using the internet, things like that. And the people that were early adopters into the space, and they don't need to be the first people, right? They can they
Right.
can see some success, get onto it later. Those people, they do a lot better,
Yeah.
right? And I think that's sort of the message we're trying to convey is, hey, this tech, even if you use it for the simplest of things, will just make your life so much easier, right? I actually use some of these MCP servers myself to get things done, especially for Discord automation.
Oh yeah,
It's a pain in the ass to make a bunch of bots, right?
it
If
is.
I can have, I can have myself abstracted away into MCP server, and I can just tell my agent, hey, come up with a statement, put this out there, right? Or summarize this article, put that out there. Um, I think in the future we're gonna see people doing some crazy things. Like we're
I
seeing
literally
people,
I had a
yeah.
text come in while you were talking from somebody who's listening to the show, and he runs one of the, this is so funny. He's talked to me about this before, but he runs one of the largest wholesale lighting uh sales companies. They sell light bulbs, light bars, like outside. But he asked me before, he said, uh when he gets in these like requests for like quotes, they come in like these big sheets. He's like, he couldn't figure out how to get Claude or ChatGPT or O3 or anybody to actually be able to digest it, get all the different serials out of it, look at the actual drawings, understand the floors, look at the dots because those correspond to lights, and then look at his back end and basically provide back a quote and follow back up. He's basically saying, this is what I've been looking for, uh, where all this tooling can now integrate and talk together instead of just trying to have like an LLM handle it all for you, if that makes sense. or not. Oh, we lost him. Didn't like the lights. I think he might have a connection issue here. Um, let me see. Not sure. Bear with us while we wait for Archiviste to jump back in. Insider NFTs, good to see you. We have a guest, Archiviste, who basically, come on. I had a question about what MCPs were, which is model context protocols. Um, Cursor uses them, but he's building his company Fabulous. Um, oh yeah, he lost internet. Give him a second. Um, just trying to understand one, obviously what they are, and you see this prompt in Cursor to use it, but then you have people building within Web3 with and it's very interesting. I wanted to get some more context there. So we'll get him back in here in a second. I think he's trying to join back in. Um, if you want to check out what ArchVSA is building, the easiest way to do that is to go over to Twitter or X.com, whatever one you want to call it, and go check them out at, I will spell it out for you here, Fabulous, Fabeliss AI, at Fabeliss AI. You can check out their website and some of the articles they put out. Again, it's I think this conversation, Archiviste, leans very technical. And anything that's going to be infrastructure related is always going to be technical. There
Right.
are still those big trends of like, okay, well, what the fuck? Like, how do I? What should I be looking for? What should I be as like a builder or somebody who's just trying to like trade tokens in the space? Like, what do I actually look? What am I looking for? Trying to understand conceptually at like a 40,000 foot view. I think that's where we got to right before we dropped off, which was okay. You can do multiple steps. You can use multiple services, and that provides more valuable output from AI and more, I think, niche down services as well to start appearing that can
Right.
do very specific things.
Yeah, sorry I cut out there. I'm traveling and the internet here is isn't the best.
Totally understand, man.
Yeah, I think we left off at the sign example, the signage example.
Yes.
I did not hear the end of
Oh,
that.
okay. Yeah. No, friend. I mean, friend was listening in. Basically, was
Yeah,
like, all right, I get these PDFs. I have to do a whole bunch of different things. I want to provide
right.
code. I have a back end. Like, is our MCPs is this what the missing link to what I'm trying to do?
Yeah, and I think there's a ton of examples for that, right? I briefly heard you mentioning trading, right? That's something that I think there are a lot of other projects that have integrations into Solana trading or whatever it may be. The cool thing about MCP is that all of those providers, we'll call them, can make their own services, and then it's up to each of them to compete on which one gets execution done a little faster than the other one. Um, and then as far as like developers and end users themselves, it sort of gives them more freedom to mix and match, and ironically reduces some of the black box effect because now you're playing with Legos instead of this conglomerate that you don't know what to do with. So if you like what one service does one way and then maybe what another service does another way, and you want to Lego them together, you can do that, right? And I mean, that's what's really cool about MCP is that you don't need to rely on a single vendor. Um, this is again, I'm speaking again more to companies and developers,
Sure.
um, more so than end users, because regular consumers are cool with whatever. If you're a fan of Nike, you're probably going to stay a fan of Nike, right?
Right.
um, but if you're at a company or something, you need 4 or 5 different alternatives just to compare to each other. More competition in the space leads to more innovation and happier UX. And I think that's going to make it a little easier to sort of make it more accessible to the end consumer, right? Because if there's two companies, they don't need to try too hard to market and to convey certain things. But if there are 30, right, we're going to need to figure out how to capture people's attention. And instead of me saying, oh yeah, composability, interoperability with your MCP, put it on your fucking agent. I can say, look, dude, you hate your job, you want the time to go by faster. Uh, Use these three services, talk to your agent, and it'll figure out how to do that stupid report for your boss that you hate,
Right.
right?
Right.
Um, yeah.
So interesting. I'm curious. I'm gonna get a little selfish here. For somebody like me, I think you're aware of what I'm building in the
Mhm.
shadows right now. How should how should I be looking at MCP? How should I be looking at your service to take advantage of what you're doing? As somebody who's building like a service for people to use with in mind, like I want agents down the road to be able to use our service. I want interoperability of if a user wants to use ChatGPT to spin up their own service, but then plug into what we're building, like that I MCP is an area I'm going to need to like think about at some point, correct?
Yeah, so there's a couple ways you could approach this, right? You could do the basic thing that everyone does, where you have your platform and then you have an AI assistant on the corner, which is cool, right? It gets things done. You could go another way, where instead of uh, onboarding those platforms, you actually offboard your service as an MCP server and let other
Oh,
people consume that and plug it in, right? So if they want to do Solana trading on Claude Desktop and they could give a rat's ass about your UI or whatever it may be, but they like your product, they can plug it into there. Or for example, I'm not with my phone, I'm not with my computer. I have access to a very limited set of tools, but I can somehow plug in to an AI interface, right? I can get all of the advantages of my platform abstracted into an MCP server. And if we go the other way and you have features that you want to integrate into your site, but you don't want to build them in house, right? You still have that AI assistant, you still have your platform. Now you have MCP where you can plug these things in or even empower the users to bring in things that you might not have thought of
yep.
onto your platform. And it sort of kind of completes the whole picture in terms of not even just a product, right? In terms of an experience where I can have little tidbits of thing. I can look at an app store, right?
Right.
Right? um, on any other platform I wanted, and it's free, right? There's no need for a third-party vendor or someone like um, Google Store or Apple Store that manages that, right? It's free and on the internet.
Right. I that's so I had another click just happen, and then I want to get to inside NFTs question here in 1 second, but
Mhm.
that makes me more bullish than on infra plays over somebody who's coming out with like, "Hey, we're a trading agent that does specifically this," and it's like that's all baked in. But I almost as like somebody who's a builder or just even a user, I'd rather be able to just pull open like Claude and be like, all right, I'm gonna build, I can get to that end product, but I still have all the versatility. I'm not paying additional fees. I can pick and choose all the little things from all the different services. And now I have that same thing, but I'm not baked into like an ecosystem or I'm not baked into like, oh, here are only the tools that somebody's like letting me use. That's where I get like really like, oh, that's cool. Um, not to throw shade on anybody who's building trading bots, but that's kind of where my mind goes to. Um, Inside in NFTs asks a very interesting question. He says, I see people lump MCP A2A and ACP in together, but MCP is different from A2A and ACP, correct?
Right. So I think what Inside NFT is referring to is A2A being the agent to agent protocol. I think Google made that one.
Yep.
And then ACP just being, I actually forgot what that stands for, but I just know it's agent communication,
Yes.
right? So I think what they're doing when people lump those three things in together is kind of just the AI landscape of how all these tools play together. They're not the same thing. MCP is arming the agent. ACP is an agent talking to another agent. Same thing with A2A. You can facilitate that communication with MCP if you wanted to. You could also empower that interaction, right? If I have two agents and they both have MCP tools, maybe different, maybe the same thing. The interactions that you get stack a little bit, right? Because they're a little bit more powerful. They have context that they weren't trained on. Um, I don't know if that answers the question for you inside NFT.
It's a good question though.
Yeah.
All of this kind of comes down to more ability to like communicate, get information, or execute. I think the arming versus the communicating is a good also one for like people to hear and understand. I get super technical talk, but I like, but actually, like I think that's like if you're listening and you've made it through a very technical talk as a non-technical user in the space, there have been things here that you can pull away and be like, okay, MCP is actual tooling to arm. But then the whole other side of like, okay, I built this agent, but I want him to be able to communicate with this other agent. Well, that's a different, you have to go a different way there. Um, but infrastructure at the end of the day being the big theme of this conversation as well. Um, he gave us an answer back here saying it does. I saw smart people lump them together and thought I was missing something. I think they might have been. There is a there is no shortage of people LARPing in this space. There's
Spamming acronyms at each other.
there's too many. There's too many. Um, well, look, Archiviste, I gotta loop back around also now to ask you like, and almost give you kind of like the podium here for a second of like you jumped into MCP. You guys are building at Fabulous. Um, Arc was the decision for where to do it. Um, I do, yes, I'd love for you to like plug yourself here, but also like where, as far as people that are like listening to this, again, should they be reading your stuff to like become more educated? If they're in an ecosystem or they're working like what like what's your call to action? I think to people is ultimately um what I'm trying to get at here is like infra is way different from like, hey, we made a shit, a bot that's gonna go and like go viral on TikTok, buy the token, attention goes up, token value goes up. That's the usual grift. For you guys, it is like your KPI is like how many people are using you, like who's integrating in, how many PRs are happening. That's kind of like your call to action, I would assume here. Sorry, that was rambly.
No problem. Yeah, so I mean, to sort of play on that, we maybe too aggressively try to get away from the whole "this is a shiny new toy, buy our token, make a bunch of money, tell your friends to buy our token," and then fucking up and down the token goes, and people are upset and DMing me about where's the next release, right? We're sort of kind of trying to get away from all of that, right? We're
Right.
trying to provide more utility, more real world assets, things that are uh, they may not be the most attractive right away with the nice bow tie on them. Like for example, this whole MCP conversation. I was actually kind of shocked that people started paying attention to it now because we've released a lot of our stuff over a month ago now. And MCP was a big topic in the nerd space and on Twitter, but not in the cryptocurrency space. And now all of a sudden, I think the new grift is, hey, make an MCP project, right?
Oh God.
Which is which is hilarious because we're not a new project at all, right? We've been around for a few months now. I think the call to action for us is for one to kind of get developers into the space, get their feet wet, get them off their asses, so to speak, right? Consume the tech, create the tech, send PRs to us, send PRs to Arc, send PRs to Anthropic, make your own shit, right? Make something cool, and then we'll use it, right? And I think the other main call to action too is more for the end consumer that isn't really sold on using any of these tools yet. I think people, when they get into AI space, they find these SaaSes that come up. They spend $20 for their fucking trial or whatever. They use the tool for a week and they stop caring. And I think that
Oh no.
at this point, but it's unfortunate. I think getting people excited more about the use cases that come out of it, idea to product, idea to workflow, uh, deep research into automating my daily tasks, right? I think once you get people in that headspace and abstract out all the tech uh, mumbo jumbo, all that jargon, I think it sort of gets them into the right direction. We're playing the long game, not necessarily the short game of really fast profits and then do some other shit. It's hey, let's build this tech together. Let's take it step by step. The cool thing about the whole composability and interoperability stuff is that everything you do is multiplicative, right?
Right.
Every time, every 100 lines of code we do is as powerful as a 10,000 line slot fest, right? And I think over time we'll sort of win some hearts over, right? We're not really focused on the people that are in it for profit, right? We're sort of focused on the people that are. I mean, there's obviously profit in everything you do, right?
Right.
The more attention these new spaces get, the more money people will make, right? And I'd be a liar if I said I didn't like money, right? Everyone
Right.
does. But what I also do like is peace of mind, right? If a task takes me 10 times less time and I can go out and do things like go to the beach or something, sign me up, right? And I think that's sort of the message we're trying to really get to people out there is, hey, you don't need to go and ask Claude to do the same thing 10 fucking times, right? Plug it in an MCP server, use the models you want, and get the result that you want.
Build something at the end of the day.
Right,
Just build. I like that.
right. Yeah.
I think
Empower builders for builders by builders.
there's something to be said about, especially like content wise, like on a stream, being like, hey, what's your call to action? I think a lot of people be like, hey, go check out our chart, go check out,
Yeah.
here's it's very I have to commend you like being like, hey, like go build. Like that's I love that. I absolutely love that.
Yeah. Don't go on deck screen or go on GitHub.
We need that's a great put it on a t-shirt. Less deck screener, more GitHub.
I'll have it. I'll have the fucking the AI draft one up for me.
Oh god. I still think that's like probably I was thinking about this actually as you were talking, like we're trending to this like their Shopify, like having a Shopify store not even existing, and like, oh, I had this idea, boom, put it on a t-shirt, and you just drop the link on like Twitter and like people just purchase it. Like that's like where we're headed to, is this weird future of everything has been built out on the back end to let you do these complex things without thinking.
That actually gives me a good idea. I'm pretty sure, and I have to look into this, but I'm pretty sure you can hook up Grok to MCP.
Oh,
So I
really?
think it's a good idea to. I don't know if it's possible. We'll look into it, but if it is, I think maybe we'll do something with MCP on Twitter where people can get things going, shaken from using
Oh,
Grok.
that would be so interesting. Well, there you go. I gotta thank you again for coming on and spending an hour with me chatting through a very technical conversation, but very valuable. Obviously, if you want to go check out what they're doing at Fabulous, you can go and check them out there on Twitter. It's FABELIS AI. As well as I think that's probably the best way to get in touch with you, Archiviste.
Yep.
And so yeah, I just got to thank you again, man. My my brain's spinning with a million different ideas. I can't thank you enough. Anything else we need to leave people with?
I would just like to say thanks for having
Of
me
course.
on. Um, it takes some time to get through these topics. If things confuse you, let the agent break it down for
There
you.
you go. Yeah. If you have any other questions, just go ask Claude. Um, Dude, thank you again. I love it. I'm looking forward to staying up to date with what you're doing and building. And I hope everybody else found this enjoyable. Thank you, everybody who tuned in. Big shout out to Inside NFTs for the great questions. We'll catch you guys on the next one.